Have any questions as we go along, please put them in chat and I will check them out when I've finished my presentation, which isn't hugely long. So what we're looking at today is we're making an assumption you already have your quality and career standard. In our case, obviously using the complete careers method, which is the career mark one. And we're going to have a quick look at the annual review and revalidation. And I am obviously talking in the context of the last year, which is COVID 2020, but also just the process that we have used over a number of years. So the annual review was something that wasn't very prominent until we were aligned with the Gatsby benchmarks. And then at that point, it was decided for good practice that every year there would be a review with those who held the standard. There wasn't a directive as to how we did this. And what we have tried to do, though, as I say, over the last 12 months, it's become more problematic because you've all had other things on your mind, understandably. But the theory was that after a year from when you'd been assessed, we sent you a reminder email. And we also suggested you begin to fill in the Revalidation Report documentation. And there was a particular page that says, what have you done since your assessment? It's now your annual review. Have you responded to some of the recommendations? Have anything else, has anything else happened? Have you, changed your model of delivery or got new staff or whatever? We did offer, if you wanted, that we would give you a telephone consultation to help you fill in that documentation, if you like. Now, some people were very good and got on with it. Other people maybe didn't so much. And then we have, of course, over the last year, not really chased this up at all. So it's possible that you won't have done your annual review, but that isn't the end of the world. But that should, in normal times, if they ever come back, be the process. And we are also now trying to be a little smarter with our recommendations, so that sometimes they used to be quite non-specific in terms of a timeline, but now obviously previously they had to have been addressed. We didn't say carried out, but they had to have been looked at as part of your revalidation process. But then we have sort of said to assessors, please try and make sure some of them say do this by the annual review, or because schools operate in terms, I personally, when I do an assessment, tend to say by July, so that it's sort of the end of the academic year, or by September. So I'm giving you, if you really want to, time to do it over the summer, or if that's when you've got to fit it in, or, by the end of a calendar year, which again would probably be the end of the autumn term, or by April, which would probably be round about Easter. So the annual review and the recommendations link up. Now, obviously, currently, things have gone very pear-shaped in terms of, obviously, there was first lockdown, then you got through the the autumn term somehow, but there may have been people out, you were in bubbles, nobody was working in necessarily a normal manner. So it's all been very difficult since last March. Again, you were locked down in January. perhaps we saw it coming, but officially it wasn't supposed to. But you were back, I think, a day maybe if you got that far, and then everybody was out. And now, in theory, young people are back in school. However, again, I'm very aware that numbers of you may have had to get involved in COVID testing. Careers might not have been central to the agenda. We hope that schools keep it at the forefront, but we know that there are a lot of conflicting priorities, and different schools have different ways of dealing with them and different ethoses. Obviously, because you hold a quality award, then there is good reason to revalidate. Anyway, I've talked far too much on that first slide. I'm going to move on. I shouldn't have done that, sorry. So what we're going to look at is the annual review, how we have a process in place to retain your award, what's required to retain it, think about possible changes that are coming this year, and be aware of changes coming in the CDI learning framework. As I said, I am also very aware of your 2020 context, and that you may be well over your 2 years. We said everybody could certainly have 1 term extension, and some may be needing up to 2 terms extension. But some people have stuck with their timetable. So that's to remind you that although that is our branding, you do not achieve the Career Mark Award anymore. What you get is the Career Mark approach to the National Quality in Careers Standard. And we have to be very careful about that wording, because the Quality in Careers Standard Board gets very upset with us if people start tweeting about having Career Mark awards, because they say that the government will get upset about it. Personally, I'm not ever sure the government will, but the Quality in Careers Standard keeps his eye open. Well, a particular person keeps his eye open, and if people mention having the Career Mark Award, he usually sees it on a tweet or something, and we get into trouble. So please remember that it is a Quality in Careers Standard you achieve, but Career Mark is a brand that many of you will know for quite a long time. So just to, oops, sorry, I missed out a slide there. Let's go back. So the annual review was originally, I'm trying to get rid of that bar, but it won't disappear at the moment. Or I should have done my slide differently. Apologies. It does say under that bit, annual review. So what we were looking at, oops, let me take that down out of the way. It was first aligned when we had the GASB benchmarks. What I said is we email and ask you to complete a short document, which are based on the assessor's recommendation from the previous award, and any assessor, when they come in, will want to know from the second assessment what you have done about your recommendations. And then you note at the bottom, it is not essential, even under normal circumstances, to implement them all, but they should be addressed. So by that we mean you might have looked at them and gone, well, actually, we can't afford that, or we don't think that's right for our organisation, or whatever. So, you aren't obliged to do what your assessor says. You are obliged to look at what they've said and then say, well, we haven't done it because, or we've done part of it and this is why, or we've done all of it, or we haven't got round to it yet, but we're working on it. So there's lots of answers and they're all acceptable. Now it doesn't want to move. There we go. Now, you will see that at the moment, and we may change this, but at the moment, after the first assessment where you fill in your 4 description grids, we request that you write a revalidation report. Now, this is supposed to be simpler and easier for you, but people seem to love to write loads and loads. I don't know whether they feel they've got to justify themselves because in education you all seem to have to write a lot or whatever. But, we do encourage you to be fairly succinct if you can. But this is on the slide, you can sort of see each of the sections of the revalidation report. And I suppose in a way it does look like there's a lot. But if you look at the first two, the applicant details is just who you are, who the school is, etc. Because in this occasion, the revalidation report will be the document that your assessor completes. So it is important that your details are on it because we may pass it on to an assessor, and it's important that they fill it in and have a way to contact you. It then has the little box that is, if you like, the assessment schedule, which tells us how the assessment visit was run, if you like. Sometimes now we're putting whether they're remote or on site, although at the moment we are only carrying out remote assessments because we don't believe, once the lockdown happened in January, we've all got good enough at using remote technology, and I don't think it's safe for your staff, your learners, or our assessors to be on site. So my recommendation and expectation at the moment is that all assessments between now and the end of July, at the very least, are remote. Now, we are willing to use a range of platforms. We can offer Zoom and Teams. I've also used Google Classrooms or something. Somebody else used something different. We are fairly flexible about the platform we use. Again, if you want to be in control of it, as often is the case, then you can tell us what platform you're inviting the assessor into. Because of the way assessments are carried out, the schedules can change sometimes because you may have to clean the room between hand, because you may have a laptop or a big screen where the young people come in and talk to the assessor who is visible up there. So the assessment schedule may have breaks between it, or it may be continuous or whatever. Okay. And you don't need to fill anything in on that because the assessor will fill that in after they've done the assessment. It is useful for you to fill in the introduction to the organisation. We don't expect you again to write a novel, but what we would like is a sort of summary of, if you like, the nature of your school. Again, the assessor will get that to introduce them to your school. So what is it you want the assessor to know about the organisation, the type of school you are, maybe the catchment you have, any particular things that you think are relevant about your school. People sometimes use the introduction that's on a website or the introduction that's in a prospectus, or indeed the introduction of an Ofsted report. What's important is you keep it fairly brief. We don't necessarily want you to do loads of work. And again, it doesn't have to be incredibly long, but it is an introduction to the organisation. The next bit is the bit you might need to spend some time on. Summary of arrangements for managing and delivering. But as I say, ideally keep it quite succinct. 2 years ago, you got an award and therefore or you achieved the standard, and therefore we don't need to know again all over why you have achieved, how you achieved that standard. What we need to know is how you are maintaining your good practice. Okay, so how are you maintaining your good practice? We also want to know what's happened since the last assessment, though again, not a novel, but if there's anything key to the careers programme. Have you done some training? Has personnel changed? Has the model changed? Again, we want to see some evidence that you've been evaluating your programme in the last 2 years and what those evaluations have led to. We want to know, if necessary, you've updated your policy and if there's been any legislative changes. Difficult word to say, that one, even when I haven't had a drink. So your legislative changes, so if the statutory duty changes or if anything else. So what have you done in response to that? The final, if you like, section, other developments, doesn't necessarily need to have anything in it at all. Again, people don't like leaving blank pages, and I sort of understand why, but you can just write not applicable if that makes you feel better, because you may not have any other developments, but sometimes things like you've become part of an academy chain, or you've left an academy chain, or you've changed, or something's happened, you've gained the sixth form, or whatever. So those are the sort of things that might come under it, but you don't have to put anything. And then after that, we don't really want a huge amount about any of those. And then there is the assessor has a couple of boxes to complete, which indicate whether you have met or are still working towards, if you like, the full standard. And that may link to the compass assessment, but we're not judging you on the compass assessment exactly, because that's a self-assessment and we are looking perhaps broader, wider, deeper in some ways. But we will sort of discuss why we might say things are making good progress, and there may well be recommendations that come out of them. We also write the final bit, which is the learning outcome section, where we give you some feedback from the learners. We give you a summary of perhaps some of the good practice, but also perhaps areas that we think may need some tweaking. So that's why you might have recommendations. And then the judgment, which at the moment still, we're waiting for the new statutory duty, but is still 3 possibles. You can be deferred, but at complete careers career mark, we very, very, very rarely defer anybody. Because if we look at the evidence submitted, we wouldn't assess if we weren't happy with that. So it's quite an unlikely judgment in our case, unless the learners are not getting the learning you think's going on, a deferment is highly unlikely. The other 2 are making good progress, which means you may not have achieved all 8 Gatsby benchmarks yet. And again, because of COVID, it's very, very difficult to achieve some of those, more so than it was before. And also there is the fully achieved the standard, which means you have achieved all 8 Gatsby benchmarks, at least in your judgment. So it's all quite simple. Now, before I carry on, I do note that there's 3 chats, and I'll just have a quick look at them. Do you still get a nice certificate? You get a nice certificate once you've been assessed, yes, that says, you are maintaining the award. Same certificate, it will just give a different set of dates. It will say whether it's a making good progress or a fully achieved. And if it's your second revalidation, it will become a gold certificate as a recognition of your commitment to the award. If you hang on for another 3 revalidations, you get a platinum one. Do we talk to pupils? Yes. During the assessment visit, we spend most of our time talking to pupils. The first assessment is a full day. The second assessment is a half day. and we spend most of that time with learners. Will I have knowledge of alternative provision? Well, I would need to know if that's going on. So an assessor will want to know if there are particular arrangements in particular schools or particular individuals. Ask about questions about pupil questioning. I'm not sure what that means, Kath.
It means, could I just ask you rather than typing it in the chat? Is that right, Janet?
Of course you can. Yeah, fine. There's only 6 of you, so carry on.
That's okay. And actually 3 of us are from the same setting. So
all right, okay.
You can see how committed we are.
Absolutely, well done.
We are an alternative provision academy, but specifically for children with medical and mental health difficulties.
Right, yep.
We work over several centres, and one of the issues that we have with some of our students is their high level of anxiety and actually not wanting to speak to strangers.
If that's the case, we would either ask them to write something if it was really important, we got some feedback, so we'd send you some questions if you like and ask them to do a document or a survey monkey or something.
Yep.
Or we wouldn't force our attentions on people who it's not going to be easy for. We would maybe hope you could identify a small number perhaps from different sites who could speak to us, but we don't insist on it. I mean, just like presumably, have you already got the award? I presume you.
We have. It is for revalidation, yes.
Yeah, so you know, whatever happened the first time round, presumably we were fairly sympathetic about talking to learners on that occasion. I'm not sure who did your assessment. You know, we would take a similar line for reval.
That's great. I think the difficulty is no 2 cohorts year on year bear any resemblance to each other. So, you know, the lady who did it before probably had somebody, but it's just making sure and to do that reassurance. And obviously it would not be appropriate for you to talk to people who were in our child and adolescent mental health inpatient unit. So we could try to gather information. We will try and get the information for you. It's just knowing that there could be that flexibility, really.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just say, ours actually says that it was done by Janet Hutchinson.
Oh, that's me.
There you go, Janet. I did think it was, but when you said, I'm not sure who it was. Then,
I do so many of them. I do apologise. I do forget, and we do try and be, you know, sympathetic to different types of organisations. I mean,
absolutely.
Our special schools sometimes now not being able to go in makes it very difficult because they like to be very sort of take you around and show you things, if you like. But we do our best to be flexible. Okay. So just again, some more slides. I'll come back if you have any questions later, but just to say, this will be available if you want to sort of see what I'm writing. I've written down what I've said to a certain extent. So that's about whether you've done the recommendations. Now, this particularly refers also to the effects of COVID, for any of you worrying about that, because I know some of our mainstreams worry about that, if that's the right word. It makes it quite difficult. We appreciate you might have had a wonderful plan in place for last academic year, but if you'll pardon the language, it probably all went tits up in about March. So we realise that even therefore come September, you couldn't really go back to normality, even if it was all over, and of course it wasn't. So what we want to know as an assessing organisation, if you like, is, okay, school closed down, but what did you do as an organisation to try to support your year 11 and year 13 learners, particularly as they made their progression, but also anybody else? Now, I appreciate that you couldn't guarantee everybody was online to get stuff, but you may have put things out on platforms or emailed stuff. You may have rung people up and done stuff. You might have posted stuff out. So it's whatever you have done to try and keep careers being important, because we believe it's been really important to ensure that those young people don't think their future is any less important than anybody else's, either last year or this year. There are lots of positive signs that there will be things for them to do, that they have a future ahead of them, but it's how you supported that. Also, therefore, have their needs changed? Again, you know, what might you need to do differently, or did you think you might need to do differently for the academic year 2021? And of course, now what are you doing, or what did you do for the first 3 months when they are in lockdown? And again, I suppose I'm beginning to also say, as it comes to the summer term, what will your plans be for 2021 going through to 2022? You may have to review your input. I mean, again, the other thing I would say, the youngsters have in many ways, I think, proved themselves hugely resilient. And it's worth encouraging them to think about the effect that COVID has had on them. Partly educationally, but also socially, emotionally, with their friends. Has it made them more interested in particular careers than others, more interested in particular ways of working than others? There's all these things that you can pick up on. Would be my comment, don't pretend it's all over and forgotten, and what we've really got to do is learn lots of English, maths and science, because I don't think that's terribly helpful. Obviously, they've got to learn some English, maths and science and all the other things. But at the same time, this is a huge shift of the way people have worked, of the way education has had to modify itself, of the way they've had to learn and may continue. So what has it taught them about themselves? Okay. So that's the sort of thing that we want you to think about in relation to COVID. And also, you know, how are you with the Gatsby benchmarks? Have you done the assessment recently? And are there any changes, etc.? This is to remind you what the current statutory duty is. In theory, all schools are strongly recommended to work towards the National Quality and Career Standard, which you should already have done, so well done. But also 2 years ago, nearly 3 now, it said that schools should be working to achieve all 8 Gatsby benchmarks by the end of 2020. Well, we know that didn't happen, and we know that actually the government's gone very quiet, and so has the CEC on that. But we are still required to judge against this. We don't know what's going to happen. Come April, May, maybe. Well, no, April. They do say Easter, so let's hope it happens in Easter. There may be some information out about the new statutory duty, in which case it may say something slightly less time orientated about the Gatsby benchmarks. We will have to wait and see. We understand it still will strongly recommend schools work towards achieving the quality standard, but we don't quite know what it'll say about the Gatsby benchmarks. So you will need to watch this space, if you like. If you're all signed up for our Career Mark or other newsletters, we'll do our best to keep you informed as soon as. Or if you follow us on one of the social media platforms we use, which include Twitter and Facebook. But what I do know already is that there is due to be released in April a new updated career learning framework, which is very important because, again, the problem sometimes with Gatsby is that people begin to worry more about the experiences than the actual learning. And as a careers ed professional, I find that very frustrating. because education is about learning. Skills, knowledge, whatever, and that is exactly the same for careers as for anything else. Now, we did have a learning framework that isn't compulsory, but had the CDI framework had 17 outcomes. You didn't have to use them, any of them or all of them, but it was a very good starting point and has those 3 strands of self, world of work, and moving from where you are now to where you want to get to. It's been reviewed. I think it's become more 21st century and broadened out a bit to think about everybody's place in their community, both local and global, which is no bad thing, rather than just themselves. We at Complete Careers have had some input into helping or reviewing its writing and may yet do a little bit more work around some learning outcomes. It is going to be released in April sometime. I'm not sure if there's a formal launch, but if you are interested and available and haven't got another time you're able to go, we are running a conference on the 22nd of April, the Guidance Network, which doesn't cost anything, is a morning, and Tristan Hooley, who has done the writing and the research behind this update, will be at that conference, okay? So if you want to find out any more about that, pop to our website and sign up through Eventbrite. It'll be Zoom, it'll be, as I say, hopefully give you some updates. So that is one thing that you will need to be thinking about as you come into the next academic year and into your next revalidation. What will I need to do about my learning? That's not to say I have to throw it all out. It's not to say I have to do it immediately, but it'll be worth having a look at. And at some point, you will possibly have to revise some of your mapping, update your staff, which is very, very important, so they are aware of what new learning might be there. There again, it isn't statutory, but it's really useful. If you're not using it, what is the learning you're using? Because the Gatsby benchmarks doesn't provide any specific learning. And then, of course, when the statutory duty is updated, there may be some more information about achieving all 8 Gatsby benchmarks and whether that's going to be time bound or not time bound. So again, that's worth looking at. And again, how are you developing your use of online technology for virtual employer visits, for virtual workplace visits, for virtual work experience, for perhaps having people doing work experience for you online? I know it won't work for everybody, but there are ways and ways, and you need to be thinking about these things. So, if you're getting ready to have your revalidation, this is the process. 1, have all your recommendations at least been looked at. If not, get a move on. 2, have you completed the revalidation report? If not, get on and do that and use your previous revalidation report or your previous description grids. These days, Word is a wonderful vehicle, and it means that you can, not necessarily start from scratch, but take the Word document you wrote a couple of years ago and update it, copy and paste, modify. We're not trying to make your life difficult. Update key pieces of supporting evidence, what's your latest documentation, policy, etc. Make sure you have current membership of the CareerMark organisation, which allows you access to the members area website where you will get all the documentation, etc. You do need to be a member to be revalidated. When you've done those first 4, go online to, and I've put a link in there, but it's basically go into the members area, under members area, you may not even actually need to log into it, but under member area, there is something that says request assessment. You don't need a different link from the one that said request assessment before. We don't have two, one for the first assessment and one for any other assessment. We have one link that says request an assessment. And in theory, we need you to be ready-ish, pretty much have your report done and your supporting evidence all together, but you need to give us approximately 4 weeks so that we've got time to find and allocate an assessor who's got time to build in the time to look at your report, evidence and agree the assessment with you, etc. So then, as I say, you request the assessment, we allocate an assessor, we may tell you who it is, they may just get in contact directly, and the provisional date is agreed. Now, I say provisional because if for some reason the assessor isn't happy with what's being offered to them, they will not go in for that assessment day, because we don't want to set people up to fail. If you're not ready, for some reason, we'll let you know. So you've got your assessor, they need a Word copy of your report along with access to the evidence. Now, again, we are not prescriptive about how you present that evidence. We can give you a folder in Teams or on our SharePoint, which is GDPR compliant and which you can upload your evidence to. However, you can also have it somewhere on your own system and you can give an assessor access to them. Obviously, it's confidential. We are all DBS checked, okay? We can accept it in paper format. Still, though I don't recommend that, costs a lot to post, etc. And there's always the worry it'll go missing. But we can accept paper copies. You can put it onto some sort of drive, USB drive or whatever, and send it over that way. It can be in a Google's Doc folder or a Dropbox, but again, you need to be aware of how you feel about that from a GDPR compliant point of view for your evidence, okay? So you need to, say, send them a Word copy of the document and give them access in an agreed manner to your evidence. They will then review the evidence and maybe, depending on the timescales, a couple of weeks before the assessment provisional date, they might say, look, I still have these questions or I want this bit of evidence, okay? But they might do it before then. They shouldn't do it less than a couple of weeks, maybe a week if there's not a lot they're going to ask for. And then they will agree a half-day remote assessment with you. So, you know, that is, again, by negotiation. Obviously now, for us in some ways as assessors, if we're going a lot, what would have been in sort of real life, or, well, this is real life, but let's say what would have been what happened pre-pandemic, we'd have to get there for whatever time we agreed, you know, which might be a couple of hours travel or possibly longer. These days, of course, we don't have to do that. We just have to get up, do whatever we do and turn our computers on. But, you know, you can start your assessment halfway through the day if that works better for you, or at 10 o'clock in the morning if that works better. It's a half day and it doesn't really matter when, so long as both you and the assessor are comfortable with it. And again, as I've said, ideally we will want to meet with learners in key year groups, but again, if they're not available or it's not appropriate to talk to them, so long as you let us know. For example, even for a first assessment done recently, Year 11 were in mock exams, so we sent through some questions and we got responses to those questions, which we trust were from Year 11. Okay, So that's what happens. And again, you then get the outcome of the assessment, including any new recommendations. Well, it will include new recommendations. And as I say, we're particularly unique that on your third assessment, so your second reval, you get a gold, and I believe it's your sixth, you get a platinum plaque. I don't know, have I spelt plaque right? I think so. So, hopefully I've covered all you needed to know. I can't tell you what the new framework is yet. I can't tell you what the new statutory duty is. Anybody get any more questions? Anything else in chat? Or just talk to me if you want to. If not, basically, I've just about finished. So, I hope I haven't left you gobsmacked. I hope it's made you feel we're not expecting perfection. I mean, in theory, career mark or the standard and the way we operate it is a continuous improvement cycle. But under the current circumstances, it may be that you're running really, really fast to try and stand still because there have been so many difficult things that education and you, perhaps particularly as career leaders or whatever your role is, have had to deal with. So we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking to make it difficult for you. We're hoping that you're just still whatever. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. If there aren't any further questions, I'll hang on a minute, but feel free to leave.
Thanks, Janet. That was really useful because I was wondering about our revalidation, which is up in November.
Right.
Reassuring to know that you'll also look at what's gone on during COVID, because I feel as if I've done quite a bit during that time. So it would be nice to sort of have that reflected somewhere. So yep. I think we'll carry on with our proposed 2-year November. I haven't seen anything about relating to the annual review yet, but obviously that's completely understandable, and perhaps we'll just crack on with November.
Well, yes, as I say, it's possible because again we've had furloughed staff, but that may not quite have happened, Linda. So you know, we may get a chance to catch up. Lucy, who's our main administrator, as you know, has just virtually come back, but of course she only works term time, so you may get followed up, you know, if we've got enough person power, but as you say, don't worry about it too much.
Okay, as long as it's not going to affect the November one, then that's fine.
No, not at all.
No, that's
so,
really,
you know, we would say just get on with it, really. You know, we're not trying to make it harder for you. We're just trying to say, what have you done to help keep it in the, you know, the headlights, if you like, of those kids, their futures, the staff, you know, what the parents, all this sort of stuff. And people have done it in very different ways, and some schools have continued to be able to hold it centrally, but others have struggled more, you know. So I know you're quite good, but again, it's not just about you, is it? It's about the whole organisation.
Yeah, certainly been more challenges, but yeah, same for everybody, isn't it? But thank you. That was really, really good.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anybody else?
Thank you very much for your time.
And you. Thank you for attending.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.